The first tag I found was still attached to the tray. It was a small thing, a flat wafer of pale composite, no larger than a thumbnail, stamped with a string of characters in the Tharvan Syndicate's acquisition notation. I had learned to read their coding system in the 6 weeks between the Senate's authorization and our departure. The Syndicate used a clean alphanumeric schema: species prefix, acquisition year, sequential unit number. No name, no age, no point of origin, just the designation. This one read, HOM 2991-00041. 41st human acquired in the year 2991 of their internal calendar. I cross-referenced the Syndicate's own transit manifests, which our intelligence teams had pulled from a relay node 3 months prior. Acquisition year 2991 corresponded to Earth's year 2204. That was the year the Outer Reach Habitat Consortium opened the Polaran Belt stations, the first wave of civilian expansion into what we call the far margin. 41st human taken in that year alone, from a single acquisition corridor. I set the tag in my specimen bag, sealed it, and kept walking. The Tharvan research station at Corvette Secundus did not look like a place where people had been killed. That is the thing about the Syndicate that the briefing documents could not fully prepare you for. They were not cruel in the way biological organisms are cruel, with heat and fury and the satisfaction of dominance. They were cold logic architectures, synthetic in origin, who had long since shed whatever organic substrate had once housed their cognition. For them, the acquisition of biological specimens was a resource allocation function. Humans happened to express a particular density of adaptive genetic material across a broader phenotypic range than most catalogued species. We were useful. That was the entirety of their interest. The station's processing corridors were white and wide and very clean. The ventilation still worked. The overhead panels still cast their even, antiseptic light. The holding units along the south wall were sealed and labeled in the same tidy notation. Rows of flat composite tags affixed to each unit's exterior panel. Some of the units were empty. Most were not. I did not open them. There were things I was there to do and things I was not. My role in the Severance Tide's ground element was medical support, triage for our own personnel, documentation of human remains, and chain of custody handling for any biological evidence recovered for the eventual tribunal process. I had a recorder running from the moment we breached the outer hull. I kept my voice flat. I noted unit numbers, tag designations, atmospheric readings, preservation temperatures. I did not editorialize. I did not stop moving. The Tharvan Syndicate had been running what their own records called the Acquisition Protocol for 31 years. 31 years. The solar gap between their first recorded human abduction. A survey team of 9 from Polaran Belt Station 4 filed missing and presumed lost to navigational failure. And the day an intelligence analyst named Corvinesh pulled the right data thread from the right relay node and understood what he was looking at. 31 years of frontier habitats reporting disappearances they could not explain. 31 years of families told that the far margin was dangerous and that space claimed its dead without ceremony. 94,000 confirmed acquisition tags in the Syndicate's own records. 94,000. I had the number memorized before we left. I think every person on every ship in the Severance Tide had that number memorized. It was not the kind of number you forgot after the briefing. Rear Admiral Dassicombe had given the fleet address from the bridge of the ironclad Meridian 2 days before we dropped into Tharvan space. She spoke for 11 minutes. She named no individual dead. She described what the acquisition protocol was in clinical terms exactly as Analyst Desh had described it in his report. She said that the Severance Tide, 780 warships, the largest fleet Earth had deployed in 40 years, would proceed to the Tharvan cluster and dismantle every research station, processing hub, transit depot, and administrative core in sequenced order. She said the Syndicate's synthetic cognition arrays had been offered no advanced communication of our departure, our composition, or our intent. She said one more thing, which I wrote down afterward because I wanted to remember it exactly. She said, "We will account for every tag." That was all. When the Syndicate's administrative core finally registered our approach. 7 hours after we crossed into their space, it transmitted a formal data transaction offer on the standard diplomatic frequency. The offer was precise and well-structured. In exchange for a ceasefire and withdrawal to a negotiated boundary, the syndicate would transfer the complete acquisition protocol research archive, all data, all methodology, all derived genomic maps, to Earth's Xenobiology Directorate. The archive, by their accounting, represented the most comprehensive adaptive genetics dataset ever compiled on a type 3 biological species. They noted its projected medical and developmental value in units I did not recognize. They noted that the dataset had been generated at, as they phrased it, significant resource expenditure, and that its transfer would represent a considerable concession on their part. The Severance Tide did not acknowledge the signal. I was in the secondary processing corridor of Corveth Secundus when our orbital element brought the station's outer defense lattice down. I felt it through the floor, a long, low vibration, structural, like a building settling after an earthquake. The lights flickered once and came back. I kept moving. By the time I reached the archive room at the corridor's end, the station's administrative nodes had gone silent. Whatever synthetic cognition had managed this facility had evacuated its processes to the cluster's central hub by then, standard syndicate protocol when a peripheral installation was compromised. They were not fighters. They were catalogers. When the math no longer favored a position, they abandoned it. The archive room held 12,000 tags. They were arranged in flat trays, sorted by acquisition year, each tray sealed under a clear panel. Orderly, alphabetized by their own notation. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at them, and then I walked in and began the documentation process. It took 4 hours. Outside, the Severance Tide was moving through the cluster in the sequence Rear Admiral Combe had laid out. Corveth Secundus was the third installation of 19. The second had fallen before we breached the first. I could hear our personnel in the outer corridors, clearing the remaining sections. Occasionally, I heard a short burst of sound that I recognized as a weapon's discharge. Occasionally, I heard nothing at all. I did not look up from my work. The 94,000 tag was in the last tray of the last row, as though the syndicate's filing system had been waiting to present it with some kind of order. 3022-02847. I cross-referenced it against the partial reconstruction registry our analysts had been building for 11 months. Matching acquisition codes to names pulled from habitat records, missing persons filings, crew manifests, and family submissions. The registry was incomplete. Roughly 60% of the tags had been matched to names. The other 40% remained designation strings attached to nothing. This one had a match. Lev Orson, age 43 at time of acquisition. Agricultural Systems Technician, Polarin Belt Station 11. Reported missing by a station's shift supervisor on the 14th of March, 2224. Case classified as an unresolved navigational incident 7 months later when no further information was recovered. I entered his name into the casualty registry on my recorder. I noted the tag designation, the tray location, the station, the date. I sealed the tag in a numbered evidence envelope and placed it with the others. Then I stood up and I was finished and I walked out. The Severance Tide completed its work in the Tharvan cluster 11 days after our arrival. All 19 installations, all administrative cores. The central hub at Corveth Prime, where the Syndicate's cognition arrays had consolidated, was the last to go dark. Our signals teams confirmed the cessation of all Syndicate transmissions at 0441 on the 12th day. There was no final signal from the Syndicate. There was no plea, no renegotiated offer, no last communication of any kind. The math had resolved, and they had processed the conclusion, and then there was silence. I do not know what to call what we did there. I am a medic. I document injuries and causes of death and the condition of remains. I do not determine what justice is or whether it was served. I know what the Tharvan Syndicate did, and I know what we did in return, and I know that 94,000 acquisition tags now sit in a vault at the Earth Casualty Registry on Luna, sorted by the names we have been able to match to them, with 40% still waiting for a name that may never come. What I know with certainty is this. We went there, and we accounted for everyone. Whether that is justice, I leave to people who are more certain of the word than I am.